helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. I'm Kara Sundlin. Our wellness certainly depends on the quality of our relationship. So how we manage conflict is going to depend on how good our relationships are. Dr. Laura Saunders is a psychologist from the Institute of Living, and she's joining us now with some science-backed tips on, I guess, how to fight better. Hi, Dr. Laura.
Hi, Kara. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so conflict is inevitable, fighting is normal, right?
Yes. So conflict is inevitable. All relationships and connections have some level of conflict or disagreement. Sometimes it's parenting styles. Sometimes it's, who's doing what chore. So there is definitely, oftentimes it's money. That's often the source of conflict. So it's not the fact that there is conflict. It's really, how do you manage that conflict? What kind of things do you do to reduce conflict? Because if you have high conflict, that's really going to be problematic. So it's actually not the conflict itself, it's how you manage it that is much more indicative of the satisfaction in a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this earlier on Great Day, but those people who say, "Oh, we never fight," that's probably either not true or maybe even not healthy. You say there's nothing wrong with a relationship when there's conflict. In fact, conflict actually provides us an opportunity to grow and maybe even get closer.
Yes, when those couples say, "Oh, we never fight," I get concerned that means one of the partners is continually suppressing their own needs or their own ideas or their own thoughts and opinions and just going with what the other partner wants. So, and that's definitely not healthy. So it is natural and common and probable that there will be conflict. You just need to have ways to reduce the level of conflict and find ways to solve the problems.
Okay, so that's really what we're learning is the right way to solve problems. And there is some science on this. So let's dive in. If you're fighting with your partner, maybe your kids, or let's start with partners. If you're fighting with your partner, what's the best way to really approach a conflict so that it's healthy and not destructive?
So really the best way to start to manage some of this conflict is by direct communication. So, but what I mean by direct communication is not a snarky comment at a time when you can't discuss it. It's not a, acting out passive or aggressively. It's not, my partner said or did something that really bothered me, so now I'm not going to talk to them for 2 days, right? None of that is direct. So what we're talking about here is direct communication, because that's the key to managing conflict.
And you say unhappy couples are more likely to express greater disagreement, hostility, and criticism, while happier couples still fight, but they're more likely to express validation, affection, and humor.
Yes, and even in those situations where, there might be some, there's some degree of conflict, and they might have more hostility and criticism, they need to find a way to come back around to the other side, because sometimes that criticism is actually a very direct way of communicating. Now, I don't want it to be too harsh because we don't want to hurt people's feelings, because then that's something you're always having to make up for. But it's not the act of the words that you're saying. It's really looking at what the intentions are behind it and what you're going to do to provide either some repair or some ways to work it through.
And that's really the key, is that we're all going to fight, but the way we repair is what matters.
Actually, in relationships, it's the repair that builds the strength in the relationship. I always go back to like the metaphor of a muscle, right? To build a muscle up, you have to sort of, do things, work at it, tear at the muscle fibers. It's the tearing and then the rebuilding that builds the strength. It's the same thing in relationships. And that's for partner relationships, that's for friendships, that's for parent-child relationships. It's not the fact that there will be no conflict. It's the repair. It's, what I thought about what you said, and I recognize that I was a little too harsh, and I want to apologize for that. Right. So that reflection and then repair does a lot to say to your partner, wow, she really kind of thought about this. She realized that she hurt me, and then she came back around and told me. So the repair is actually really critical in a lot of these situations.
Yeah, and the only thing that I wonder about, though, is yes, you can repair, but if you keep fighting about the same things and then keep saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, the repetitiveness can maybe take away from the repair. So I guess we have to find a way also to just solve the problem.
Yeah, so there's a couple things with that. So what I don't want is for people to say things that they don't mean. Like I'm sorry I said those mean words to you. And if you're someone who's impulsive and lashing out at your partner and then just, at some point later saying you're sorry, but not working on the impulse control or the frustration issues that's causing you to lash out and say mean things, that's where the repair needs to come in. The repair needs to be in your own behavior. It sounds like that individual might be taking accountability, but they're not working on the core issue, which might be impulse control or emotion regulation issues or frustration tolerance. They're not working on that. So oftentimes, when a lot of couples argue about money, and money might really be the dollars and cents of a budget, but money is also really indicative of deeper things. It's about power and control and about respect, right? So one partner might earn more money than another partner, but are we equals in this, or am I 60% because I earn more than you and you only get a 40% say, right? So it's very often money conflicts are about respect.
And also we fight about money, but you might come at it from totally different beginnings, right? So much of the way we fight dates back to our childhood, or you're feeling really unsafe about money and your partner's thinking, I'm not freaked out, this is easy, we'll fix this. So we've come at it really differently.
Yes, I was going to say that. And like when someone goes into couples therapy, say, that couples therapist will spend time talking about like family of origin issues, because very often we bring our family of origin issues into our relationship. How your parents handle things, or how you were raised, or how your parents didn't handle things. You bring in those family of origin issues. But for the purposes of what we're discussing today, we're not going to go do a deeper dive, but just suffice to say that, yes, how you were raised, family of origin issues really do play a role in communication and solving conflicts in a partnership.
So we want to get to a cooperative, constructive, problem-solving way. And I feel like if you have a job outside the home, you probably deal with this, because you probably don't fight with your coworkers at work or at school the way you would with family, because there's mechanisms or expectations. So do we need to create the way we're going to solve problems?
Yes. What we're talking about is negotiation, solution-oriented, using some reasoning, some logical reasoning. Solving a problem when you're at the height of your distress or sadness or anger is actually not going to help. And that's the time when often you say things that you don't mean. So coming back to a more logical, emotional place, like, I can't discuss this right now. I'm better served talking about it tomorrow. Or I'm on the verge of falling asleep. I can't talk about this big issue. Let's just talk. Let's find a time tomorrow. So, agreeing upon a mutual time to talk about an issue or conflict, having some alone time. Parents often have difficulty finding alone time, which is often has to be either when kids are in bed or sometimes when they're at work, they take a few minutes during the day to have a phone call or talk to each other. So, using more logic, staying away from highly emotionally laden topics when you're in an emotional state. And also really focusing on, okay, what are we going to do next? How are we going to solve this? As opposed to, I just want to be right. You said something, I think, really spot on during Great Day, which is, do I want to be right or do I want to be kind? And sometimes that's the jumping off point.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we hear it's always better to be kind than right. But in the heat of the moment, that can be hard. And especially, you mentioned some people are impulsive. Like when your partner says, I just can't talk about this right now, that can be hard, because I might be a kind of person who's like, I want to talk about it right now. So we have to learn how to wait, I guess, and how to come to the table when we're calmed down.
Yes, and actually, and then initiate it, because sometimes you feel like, okay, well, I feel better now. We had that argument yesterday, but I still have unresolved feelings. How do you come back to it? So how you come back to it, because knowing that sometimes those feelings will get stirred up again. How do you initiate? How do you come back to it? Because if all you do is avoid, it is highly likely that those feelings or those concerns or those issues or those worries are still there. And then there'll be some other trigger that'll, boom, start off the conflict again.
Yeah.
So it's having the courage sometimes in those situations to step into something that's uncomfortable at a time when you're not in a highly emotionally aroused state.
So what do you do if it's the same problems and something that your partner is doing really bothers you all the time and they say, I'm sorry, but then either you or your partner, you just keep repeating the behavior and you're like, well, they didn't change. I mean, so often we want the other person to change either something about themselves or a behavior, and we hear you can't change other people. But is it important to change your behavior if it's really bothering your partner?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what it is. I mean, if we're talking about larger issues like substance use or any kind of like gambling or bigger issues that you can't just ignore over time, or there's really having a negative impact, not just on the relationship, but your feelings and your own self-worth, right? So barring those really bigger issues, and sometimes we do need professional help for some of those bigger issues. But for some of the more mundane or day-to-day issues, there is a balance between like letting things go, right? If you just don't like the way your partner gets out of bed and they're kind of loud in the morning, some of those things you just need to let go. You can say, can you please try to be more quiet? You always get up earlier than me. Can you please not let your alarm go off 4 times? Because that means I'm waking up an hour earlier than I need to, right? Some of that stuff you can negotiate. But some of it is just you sort of letting it go because you holding on to the grudge, or you holding on to something that's making you feel angry all the time is not helpful. Forgiveness is not about I forgive and I allow all this behavior. Forgiveness is often for yourself. Like, I'm just going to allow myself the patience to just get through that, those 2 morning alarms, even though it annoys me, because I know what to expect. So the forgiveness is often for yourself.
Yeah, and that's so important, right? Forgiveness really is what you do for yourself, the choice to let it go so you're not holding on to it. So again, so much of this conflict resolution seems like it's not about the other person.
It's not about the other person. I mean, I do want people to have a sense of self-worth and self-respect and how they go about things. I want partnerships to feel like they're equal, but remember, equal does not mean always 50-50. In a good partnership, it might be, one partner struggling because of work issues or family issues or other things. And it might be that one partner's putting in 60 to 70% while the other partner only has 30%. But then at a later point, they're in a different place. Now they're able to kind of give a little bit more. So remember that equal does not mean 50-50. It means that we go back and forth and we provide some balance for each other. I understand you're in a difficult place, so I'm going to give a little bit more time and energy and attention, or I'm going to spend more time managing the kids while you're dealing with some difficult work issues, with the hope that, over time, we're going to come back around and I'm going to feel support when I need it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Even day by day, if your partner has a really long day and they're working and that's the day that they're not going to do the chores and that's really annoying to you because now you're going to have to do them, you're actually making that choice of like, okay, I'm going to do a little more today because it's not a 50-50 day. This person has a really tough day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's part of that constructive problem solving, right? I realize that, or my partner has a really difficult week. They've got X, Y, and Z going on with their family or with their extended family or at work. So I'm going to step up, right? I'm going to assume that this week I'm going to need to do 60 to 70%. They need to do a little bit less because of additional stressors. And I understand that, with the hope that, I can say, I know you've had a difficult week. I'm doing the best that I can, but on Friday, I really need you to do X, right? So that's that direct communication again. So it's the direct communication and it's the constructive problem solving. It doesn't mean we're letting things go. It doesn't mean we're emotionally withholding, for days at a time. We're trying to focus on direct communication and problem solving.
Which is so important because if you're fighting and you're getting angry and you're thinking, gosh, our relationship is in trouble, you as a psychologist are here to tell us that's not necessarily so. Sometimes people get angry and they fight and they actually have better relationships.
Yes, again, in all relationships have conflict, even work relationships. They won't be the same as things that would happen, within a romantic or other kind of partnership, but learning to communicate directly about what you need and learning to solve problems in a constructive way, to, compromise at times, or to step back if you really feel like someone else can manage things better than you. That's sort of putting aside your ego and your pride at times. So it's that belief that at the end of the day, we're working in this together. It's that connection and that repair, but it's managing conflict, not avoiding it.
Right, because a lot of these problems might not ever go away. We think we'll be happy when the problem goes away, but sometimes these problems aren't going to go away, so it's about how we handle them. I want to ask about parents. We've been talking a lot about partners, but if you're parents, is it true you should never fight in front of your kids? And of course, sometimes we do that, so we feel badly, but what is the rule about conflict management between parents and in front of children?
Well, I do think it is okay to try to negotiate a conflict in front of your children. Certainly, I don't want swearing or name calling or insults. I don't want any of that kind of stuff in front of children. Well, I don't want any of that kind of stuff between partners because it's very damaging. But I definitely don't want it in front of children, because then children pick up on that behavior and might treat their sibling in a demeaning or threatening way. So it is okay to have conflict, and it's also okay to come back around and say, I know that you saw, your mother and I know you saw your father and I, or, my partner and I arguing yesterday, but I want to let you know that everything's okay and we're working it through, right? To circle back around with the kind of the tie up of that communication and say, listen, I know you saw that, and you showed that you were a little bit worried and you were telling us to stop arguing, but I want to let you know that we are comfortable communicating directly and everything's okay. So you circle back around.
And if you did make those mistakes and you maybe were cursing or yelling or being insulting, overly critical in front of the kids, do you also own that and say, I'm not proud of how I behaved, I shouldn't have done X, or do you just not mention it again?
Yeah, no, I'd say I feel bad about the fact that I got so angry at your mother or your father, or yes, I lost my temper when I said X, right? So again, that you're being a role model in that situation, because my guess is that if you're someone that's losing your temper a lot with your partner, you might also be losing your temper with your children.
Sure.
So to show that repair when you're in a calm and more logical place, I think can be really helpful.
And let's move it to the realm of children. We often have conflict with our kids. Expectations, they didn't do their chores, or you're coming home and you're tired and they're whining and they're irritating you, or they're having a meltdown and that causes you to have a meltdown. So do these rules that we just talked about of conflict management sort of apply also with the kids, that it's normal to be fighting with our kids, but we also have to really work on repairs?
Yes, I mean, I actually like the word conflict more than fighting, because fighting, I think, has a connotation that it's loud, or it could be more abusive. All relationships have conflict. All relationships have disagreement. I could want my child to do X and they could say, I'm not doing X, I'm only going to do Y. So then you have to say, is this something that I'm going to really stick to my guns on? Or is this something where I can say, you know what? What's your reason that you want to do Y? I want you to explain it to me, right? That's showing that you're willing to negotiate. There's times as a parent where you're not willing to negotiate, like getting your kids to school every day, or, doing issues around safety. They're just going to ride their bike wherever they want. No, you're going to only ride your bike on our block, right? So there's times where there's conflict and you have to manage it. And as a parent, there's times where you're going to set a hard line. And there's other times where you're like, why am I setting a hard line on something when, it really doesn't matter so much? What you wear to school, or some of the other little things, figuring out where you can let some things go and where you need to draw a line in the sand.
I want to give some folks some grace. I think a lot of people feel badly. Maybe they've gotten divorced. Maybe they fought too much in front of their kids and think, I've ruined them. I really damaged my kids. Do we overestimate how much our flaws influence our kids?
I do think so. I mean, I'm not going to say that children aren't impacted by things, but in the case of divorce, actually, that's a great example where what all the research shows in long-term outcomes with the children of divorce is that there's two core issues. the level of conflict and the level of communication. So between two divorced parents, if they can be low conflict or lower conflict and at least moderate to high communication, those are the best outcomes.
Okay.
So remember, it's not just the event that causes something, it's the, the repair, the ongoing relationship. So in situations where there is divorce, playing your part in keeping conflict low and keeping communication moderate to high, that's what shows the best outcomes in with children of divorce.
So now I want to move to conflict management, maybe in the workplace where there might be a power imbalance, and it could be a coworker or it could be a boss where you're like, I'm really upset with something at work, but you don't know how to deal with it. You think, I'm just not going to deal with it because I'm the employee and they're the boss. How do we deal with conflict when maybe there's a power imbalance or someone has a little control over you?
So that is a more difficult situation, and a lot of times those situations do come up, especially in work where there might be a manager and an employee. I do think that being thoughtful in understanding like what the issue is or what your position is. Is this an issue of respect? Is this an issue of, because I think that's what often money is about. With even in employee situations, it's I don't feel respected because I'm not paid what I feel that I'm worth. So it's doing your homework in situations. You don't agree with the new policy that's come out. You are doing your homework about why that policy might not be helpful or effective with your client base or in your situation, and then presenting that information. Rarely going into a situation heated and hot will solve anything. So trying to come back to like more reasonable problem solving mode when you're in a more logical, emotional place is always the best response.
Just because I get to interview wise minds like you, I like to play an armchair psychologist. So I often tell my kids when they're really mad and they're dealing with a friend or something that just remember the I feel, rather than you. And that's something that we can think of in the heat of the moment. The minute we're saying you, we're usually not managing conflict very well, right?
Right. Or at work, it would be this place always does it this way, or this place is wrong. It's you're creating a situation where you're displacing blame. And in any situation, it's like, I'm uncomfortable when this happens. Well, no one can really refute that because I'm sharing my feeling, right? Well, no, you're not uncomfortable. Actually, yes, I am, right? So no one can refute that. Or I get worried when, I'm uncomfortable when, or for me, it's, I feel respected when this happens, right? When I feel respected when I get communicated about a change before the change actually happens. So it's coming from that I place, making I statements. That's really the best way to address a lot of these conflicts.
And there are people, who are really into like trying to do this the right way. But there are a lot of people, I think, in the world that don't care about how to resolve a conflict, or they just want to win. And so I guess sometimes we have to recognize who we're dealing with, right?
Yes, and right, that gets back into some of our other podcasts on dealing with narcissists and other things. Right, there are bigger issues that we're not going to address simply by being direct communicators and being in a problem-solving mode. Right, those are bigger issues where you need to sit back and say, am I just in a toxic environment and this is really not good for me? And that could be a relationship, or that could be a work environment. So really looking deep into those situations, saying, I have tried A, B, and C to manage this situation differently. This has been going on for many, many months at this point, and now I'm just concerned that this situation or this place or the what I'm involved in is too much for me, and I need to find an exit strategy.
Okay, so let's do some takeaways as we're coming to the end of our time together. If you can remember, I like to give people, the rule of threes, three things to think about the next time you're approaching conflict that will help you stay in a healthier place, maybe even make your relationship better, because we've learned that conflict is okay.
Yep. So conflict in and of itself is not inherently bad, and it can foster growth. Direct communication, not emotional withdrawal, not angry, angry, high arousal communication is really the best. And taking the time to have difficult conversations when you're in a more logical, emotional place is really the best way to start to come up with a plan to resolve it.
And that last one, that sticks for me anyway, because I probably tend to be a little bit more emotional, and my partner can be a little bit more like, I'm fine, and unless you really push them. So we need to understand that sometimes we have to walk away. I guess that old saying, count to 10 or whatever. When you're in a calmer state, you're going to have better access to your logic, and that might mean just being like, I gotta wait, which is hard. Waiting can be hard for you or for your kids.
Waiting's very hard, right? Because often when we're in that high emotional state, it's like, this is when I want to make my points.
Yeah.
But honestly, we don't do our best thinking then, because who doesn't walk away from a conflict situation like that saying, oh, I should have said this, or I should have said that, or I definitely shouldn't have said that. So we know that in those high arousal times, those where your emotions and reactivity are high, is not the best time to solve problems.
And the good thing is, I mean, you've obviously had lots of people on the other side of the couch. People come back, they can be in stages of their life where they're really having a lot of conflict and they're really feeling like this isn't going to work. And you see them learn skills and come out of it and actually be better and stronger for it.
Yeah, because it's again, it's really about their commitment to move, in a couple, it's their commitment to moving forward with shared values and shared growth. So, are you motivated to work towards resolution, or are you not motivated and therefore you're just getting farther and farther apart in some of those situations?
Yeah. Okay, that's a little bit of an aha. I'll call it the Oprah aha moment, that really the best relationships are both people, they might fight, they might have different, maybe one's a worse fighter than the other, but like the idea of that shared commitment of we're always going to get past this. And then they're going to be willing to learn how to deal with this conflict.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Laura Saunders from the Institute of Living, as we all have conflict. And in our last 90 seconds, we have a little bit more time than I thought, so our last 90 seconds that we have together, I'm curious, and I'm putting you on the spot, but this is a great podcast to listen, I think, with your loved one, maybe even get on the same page about parenting, about money, about all the things that like keep coming up for us. Are there any books or any homework you would like us to do?
So there's lots of good books out there. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but what I want people to do is realize that learning how to solve problems, learning how to be a more direct communicator actually has mental health and health benefits. It makes you feel better about yourself and better about your relationship.
Yeah. And that helps us with our physical health too, because a lot of studies have shown that when we do not have good relationships, it affects our physical, our mental, everything. So it's so important that we learn how to do this. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us, Dr. Laura Saunders. We appreciate it. We'll work on conflicting better. I won't say fighting.
Thank you, Kara.
All right. And if you've enjoyed this, please listen to it with a loved one on the CURES podcast. Find it on any platform you want. You can also watch the CURES show every weekday on the Wax, our sister station, at 8:30 a.m. if you're listening here.